Welcome to episode 2 of the second season of the Fashion of Web3 podcast, where we're discussing how things are done differently in Web3. And today we have a very special guest with us. His name is Hunter Orrell. We got connected through a shared friend. And since we found out about WAGMI United, we really wanted to talk to Hunter to understand his journey in turning a football club into the number one team of the internet. But we also do talk about him co-founding Futureproof, his own fund, and STA, his talent management agency. And so, as you might notice, it's very difficult to put Hunter into any type of industry box. And this is what makes his story so unique. Enjoy the episode and let us know what you think. Thank you so much for joining us, Hunter. And I'll let you introduce yourself and tell us a bit about your background.
Sure. My name is Hunter Orrell. I'm currently the CEO at Futureproof, which is an investment company in the Web3 space and some fringe industries as well. And then I'm the co-founder of STA, which is a talent, media, and advertising agency that basically works with some of the world's largest influencers and companies to bring advertising and activations to life. On top of that, I've founded a couple of Web3 companies and helped launch some organizations within Web3. So like LooksRare is a big one that I'm known for, the marketplace to buy and sell NFTs. And then one that most people are aware of in the UK is WAGMI United, which is the ownership group for Crawley Town, a League Two professional football club. Kind of spread thin in many different industries, and I kind of just am attracted to the things that get me excited and I have a passion for. So that's why I have my hands on a million things right now.
That's super exciting. We were wondering, what are your general interests and what got you started in the first company that you founded?
Yeah, I'm attracted to problem solving. So I went to college for mechanical engineering purely based on the idea of learning how to problem solve and reverse engineer and identify solutions. I think as a kid, that entrepreneurial spirit was also there. So I was the kid at the bottom of his driveway selling, lemonade, going door to door, shoveling snow, or cutting grass. I just had to be doing that. And I think when I got into Web3 and I started getting into these different business positions, it was more of well, what's wrong and what needs to be done or can be built, or is there a missing solution in the industry right now? And it's primarily in stuff that I like to do. Soccer is something that I've played since I could walk, and I played for very, very competitive teams, and I was part of the Olympic development program. And for me to say okay, where's the sports industry going and how can I be a part of that and implement change, and might not be on the field, but potentially as an industry, how do fans interact with a sports team? I want to be part of that. So I'm definitely guided by passion and what I find interesting, and I tend not to chase things for money. It's purely on, again, passion and what do I really want to be doing.
You kind of answered one of my questions that I had, whether you have been kind of this active entrepreneurial person since childhood, but I was wondering, what was the first thing that brought you to your first business, and which of your companies was the first one? Was it
Oh, my first business? My first real business. Oh, nobody's asked me about that. It's such a good question. My first real business, I was actually a competitor with Google Maps. So I went to a large high school that had a large campus, and it was hard to find building to building. And this is before, you gotta go way back. Google Maps primarily just showed you addresses. You couldn't click on buildings, you couldn't search by location. And so me and a friend basically built out this whole layering system that allowed us to build out our own Google Maps competitor, but just for our high school's campus. And you could click on buildings and you could get directions to buildings. You could search for parking lots, handicap access, very, very specific things. And then we added in, which was the whole reason this started, was a girl was coming to watch me play in a basketball game. She couldn't find where the gym was. And then I was like, well, why can't you just search for the gym on a map or something? Because it was just a PDF that you would look at. And so I was like, well, you should be able to search oh, somebody's playing at field 4 in a soccer game. Where's field 4? So we basically built this thing all out. The high school was using it for a bit, and then because the parents, of course, were using this map, one of the parents who ran a large technology company reached out and was like, "Hey, this is great. I think every college, every school around the country should use this." And they basically purchased the rights to license out that technology and software package that we had built. So again, yeah, like that was like I had never coded really before either. So like I was like stuck with like Cold Fusion books because everything was built on like Cold Fusion engine and like JavaScript and like learning all this stuff for the first time. But like it was so much fun to me because it was like, oh my God, like nobody's done this before and people are gonna love this, and like, it's gonna make people's lives better. I was so just blown away. And I didn't go into that being like, oh, this I could sell this for money. It was more, oh, this would just be so cool to like build.
It sounds like a Facebook
A little
beginning
bit,
of a
yeah.
Facebook story.
A little
Uh,
bit. I definitely get like that vibe, like going back and thinking about the story, how it's like, you know, there was just like no intention besides it was cool to do it. And it definitely led to a lot of good opportunities. And I think that was truly like when that happened, I was like the springboard for me into this world of like, okay, if you have an idea, you can definitely build it and there's potentially a business there. And everything since then has just kind of been like what's a business, what's not a business, like how do you approach that if it's a real problem that you're having every day or others having it kind of mentality.
How did that go? And like, how did you exit the business? Or like, what happened at the end?
It was an interesting exit because the software company that ended up buying us was a online college, and they turned around and just used it as like a new business line, and they were opening up a brick and mortar college system across the country. So they were going to use that as like, hey, like you can identify our buildings within a city, stuff like that. So we just got a nice little check and helped them integrate it for like 6 months. And yeah, and then I like the whole time I was like, what am I gonna do next? Like this is so much fun. Like I could do this again. Like um I would wake up every morning because I would drive to the high school to sit in this like little room on the second floor of like this library. It's just like a room the size of like an apartment bedroom, and it'd be me, my friend, and these other two guys, and we'd just be coding from like 9 a.m. until 5 every day. I'd go home and I'd like sit in front of my laptop, continue coding. Like that was so much fun to me. It felt like you were building something, and like every day was progress, and like people would come and check it out, and like yeah, it was so much fun.
So first of all, it sounds really interesting, and it's so great to see as an like early entrepreneur that there's actually a need for what you're building, and then having someone buy your first venture, it shows you that I can actually do this. I can actually do it again. And I was wondering if you've met any people along the way that really inspired you later on, like some future business partners around that time as well.
Oh, that's a good question as well. I from like my high school, college days, I've definitely come across people that maybe not in the moment I realized it, but down the road were like super impactful. And I think also like with the rise of social media as I was a kid growing up, also like being able to watch YouTube and like, Gary V was a big help, and like he's become kind of a friend of mine, and like AJ Vaynerchuk as well. um Dre Rosenweg and like others like that, like they put out content and talked, and like just being like guiding resources before like being an entrepreneur was cool. Or being like, I consider a lot of people within the Web3 ecosystem, even if they don't think they are, they're entrepreneurs, and like they're building something, and like they're like attacking problems that they see. It wasn't cool back in the day. It didn't become cool until like, we had the Social Network movie, and we had, people when people raised money, it became like this celebration, like, oh my God, you sold part of your company for, 10% of your company for $1 million. Oh my God, we're so excited. Like it got kind of sexy and hot. Um, I think the most impactful people though, like for me growing up, were definitely my parents, like just like supporting me and like encouraging me. And then um kind of like wrapping this back into Web3, I think the biggest asset you can have is like being willing to like get out and network and just meet people. And they don't have to like add value to you, but just being able to like bounce ideas off or discuss, or they might introduce somebody. Um, I've found that like over the years, just like being happy to like chat with people and know them and understand like their background and experiences and how they think about the world is certainly, I think, the most valuable thing possible.
What are the differences and challenges from your first business to now?
Oh yeah, that's a good one. I think my first business was, it really taught me just because I think it's a problem or just because I want it doesn't mean other people want it. I mean, I think that's something that everybody struggles with. And now as I've grown into what we're doing today, it's never about me individually. It's more about like, what do your consumers want? What do your users want? What's going to make people happy? How are they going to react? Understanding that dynamic, and just being intentional with that. I think there's also like a level of like humbleness that needs to come where you could think something's right, but that doesn't have anything to do with, you have to understand what the general public or what your user base thinks is right. And I'm sure that seems super obvious to some people, but for those who are like building right now, I really think it's so easy to get just like stuck on like the spotlight focus of like, here's my vision and like what I want. And just taking that simple second to like, I've seen people do it where like they talk to like 8 customers and they're like, every single customer has said the same thing. And it has like, I don't know if they understand the problem. And then they go, oh, maybe I don't understand the problem. And it's like this huge like eureka moment of, okay, that product, like that customer discovery activity has been huge for me. I also think understanding where like the industry is going with like Ready Player DAO, with a lot of like these Web3 businesses, where we are today, when we have like this real, influx of people into the industry, when we actually hit scale, things are gonna be very different. So building something that works today but is ready for that, like the tomorrow of the industry, is also very important in my opinion. Not boxing yourself in where like, oh shoot, we have to like restart and like build V2, or like we haven't approached this with a like future sustainability. With what we did, it was like every time we wanted to like expand our first business, we'd have to build from the ground up in a new way, with all this new infrastructure every single time. It was not scalable. And we weren't thinking, how does this get into the hands of millions of people? It was just, how do we do this once? I think that's also a huge lesson that I learned, is like, how do you scale things and how do you make it really work, if you want to be a huge business?
So I think it's a great answer. Something that I think most of the founders in the NFT space, because they have no experience, don't understand, and just like a little bit locked in and learn as they go.
Yeah.
But maybe I actually have kind of like 2 questions. One is about WAGMI, like how you decided to come to this idea of starting this internet team, football team or soccer team, depends from which side of the world we're talking. And I think then maybe I will ask you about your strategies when you invest into different projects with your fund.
Okay, totally. So with WAGMI, I'll say there's 2 approaches, and this comes from, my love for Web3. I absolutely think Web3 is going to, it already has. It's revolutionizing so many industries, and it's bringing these new functionalities to industries we haven't seen before because of, the underlying tech. I think that with, on the other side of things, I'm also like a huge like proponent of like user generated content. Being like, social media is like the greatest thing to ever happen. And I don't think that in, the UK there's many teams, and I don't actually think in the world, I don't think there's many teams using social media correctly to get their brand in front of millions and millions of people, stand out, using different platforms correctly in the ways that they should be used. So I looked at WAGMI United as, purchasing the club offering Web3 functionality in a way that allows for the fans to have a voice they might not have had before, to interact with the team outside of, game days in a different way. These new functionalities we haven't seen before. On the other side, it's how do we do things that are redefining the club from a social media, cultural perspective, where you would never see a traditional football club operate. And so like doing things with like the Sidemen, signing Jed, doing things with Adidas, having like we're doing things that are out of the box, and not just for like publicity, but because it's like, well, why not? Why aren't others doing it? I think, and I'll say this because I'm sure there's going to be fans that listen to this and are like, well, you're low on the table, you're near the relegation zone, like it hasn't worked. I do think that there's growing pains in any business, right? And I think being able to identify those and navigate them is a huge skill set, and you have to have that if you're going to survive. And I think we're doing that. I do think with like the Web3 and this content strategy we've provided, there is a third kind of like vertical within like the football industry, and that's winning game. Like winning games is like your lifeblood for being a sports team. You could do the social media great, you can do the NFT stuff and the Web3 stuff great, but like to really survive as a football club, you have to win games. And I think I will say, like, I came into this with my biggest concern being we don't win games. And I truly think that we're in a position now where like that has to be our only focus. And I'm kind of like rambling here because it is like a very complex situation. I came in, I don't think fully appreciating how crazy like running a sports team could be, and how intricate it is of a business, and how delicate it is. Like, again, I could have the greatest merchandising line, I could have the greatest stadium amenities in the world, it could be amazing, but if they're not winning, it actually it ruins everything. Like that is the one core pinnacle piece of a sports team, which is obvious, but it didn't hit me like how hard and how that would slow things up as much as it has. And then you had another question outside of that, which was, how do I make my investment decisions? I think WAGMI is a terrible example of how I make investment decisions, because I tell this story, people go, you're an idiot. But I made my WAGMI investment because I got a text message in the morning of December. And I woke up at like 8:30. I remember like rolling over, I had one text, and it was, do you want to buy a football club? And I just said yes. And I think within like a couple hours, I'd wired money. And I had no idea, like I didn't know where in the world we were buying a football team. I didn't know who. I just said yes, like here's money, here's, I was just like, here's probably what a football club costs, and like here's money for it, and like what I want to put in, and like we were off, because it's like my biggest passion. So, but I do think that like does flow into like a lot of my other investments. Like, I'm like super passionate about convenience and like waking up in the morning, having a good breakfast. And that's led to an investment in the CPG space, and making investments within like the NFT marketplace, or like browsing ability, like, because I have a passion for that stuff. But I ultimately, at the end of the day, see what value that brings, what problems that's solving, and how other people might want to use that product, and how there's like a clear path into like cash flow, revenue, profit, and ultimately being a huge success as a business. But passion's like the underlying thing. WAGMI, it just was a little bit bigger than usual.
I think it's the first time that someone is turning a football club into a Web3 company. Who knows, like where we'll be in less than 20 years, and like maybe
I think you'll see every sports club in some sense will, and it's hard because I think if I could go back and like talk to the individuals involved with WAGMI, I would 100% have downplayed like being a Web3 team, because, and here's why. I think in 10 years, 20 years, you're going to see every sports team in the world have a digital component side, and like they're not going to call it an NFT. It'll just be like, here you can buy this, it's a digital asset, and that's it, and it gives you X utility, or it's just a collectible or whatever. But they're not going to be like, hey, we're a Web3 sports team now. There's going to be a sports team that uses a technology that's, being used by companies, individuals, whoever. I think that's ultimately like we're proud to be the first one to really lean into it. But at the end of the day, we're just a football club. And like the football matters, but we have this thing on the side that happens to be like these digital collectibles. And on this other side, we're like this media company that has a social media presence and does these very interesting social media bits. But you can also see this in corporations like Starbucks is in a Web3 coffee company. There just happen to be a coffee company that is now using Web3 technology to leverage and enhance an existing program that they had at their business.
True. And probably the companies that are going to use Web3 technologies will be the ones where you don't know what technology
You don't even know.
You're just taking the benefits, but you don't show the underlying technology, obviously. Why would you?
Yes.
I wanted to ask you regarding WAGMI, who did you actually address initially? Like when you came in and those fans had to kind of get used to the new owners, like how did you talk to them about your plans? How did you onboard them?
So I think it's really unique with the fans. Originally I was like looking up slang words on like Google because I was getting DMs and comments of like words. I was like, I don't know what that means, but it's not a compliment kind of thing. Um, and it was like it was very standoffish of like, you're American, you do crypto, which is like this scammy, terrible thing. This is like our club. You're coming in here. You guys are young. You don't know what you're doing. Like, I mean, like you name it, like there was a reason for them not to like us. And I'm again totally understanding and empathetic to that because this is their baby and it's something that's been around for since 1896. It's old and it has history and prestige, and they don't want these guys coming in and ruining their club. So I think I approached it differently than I think others in the organization did. And my total idea was like, go over there, go to the pub, drink some beers, just talk to them, go to the local pitch and like kick the ball around with like the kids and like, invite them to come hang out, like just be a human being. I think everybody gets wrapped up in like, what's your strategy and what are you going to do? And like, how, at the end of the day, like oftentimes like the best strategy is be a human being and show that you're like who you are and be authentic to yourself. I'm authentically, unfortunately, like the guy who will go like play soccer in the park for like 2 hours and then go to the pub and drink until like everybody's done, and like I'm cool with that and like just hang out and like smile and laugh and tell crazy stories. And I think that had a huge impact on the local fans and the locals that lived in Crawley, and them understanding, hey, like this guy cares, he loves the sport, he understands the culture to an extent, he's willing to listen, he's willing to talk. I think that was the best way to approach this. I also think that me explaining, hey, we're not here to like just sell digital assets and like take money and like we're gonna dip, like this isn't about profit, this isn't about us just like making money, and it's not about you guys not mattering. Like this matters to us, we care and understand, but we also care about the football on the field, and that will always be number one, the most important thing. It's not going to be, hey, like we'll get to the football strategy and our transfer window stuff down the road, and like right now we're focused on NFTs and trading and the price of Ethereum. Like football will always come first. And I think them understanding that mentality helped. And I think some did start to understand, like, all right, these guys they're decent people. I want to understand what they do because they come from this different world, and taking the time to explain how, crypto works or an NFT works and why this technology is different, how it might impact their day-to-day life. That also kind of was like, breaking bread with them. So we've released a lot of like fan favorite players over the last 40 days, 30 days. And that's been hard because you have these people leaving the club that have been there for years that they truly love. And like I don't talk about this very often because there's really not a good platform to talk about it or a good time, or it doesn't feel right. But like, I'd love to explain this. Like for me, it's been really hard because I consider these players part of a family and friends. Like I watch them train, I talk to them, I have lunch with them, I text them, like I meet their wives and their girlfriends and their kids, and like I truly care about them. and to see them leave pains me, but to also see like the fans get upset and be like, you dumb American, like what are you doing, really like is frustrating on like a side of, you have to run the team a certain way, and you have to make decisions with like information that isn't public, or strategies, or take, you're taking a direction with the team that you think is best for it to not get relegated, or to start winning games. I've struggled with that. Like that's been very hard, where, you know, the fans are so passionate and are so protective of the team that it does feel like there's no way to even say like explain it. And you kind of just have to be like, all right, be mad at me. Like I'm willing to be yelled and hated by certain people if you don't like me. And ultimately the only way to save that is by having the team perform well in some way. The football industry has taught me a lot about business in ways that like I appreciate. I'm like appreciative like how hard it's been.
And it actually leads me to the question that I think lots of Web3 founders could relate to, the struggles of being a founder, and then the backlash that people receive quite often in the Web3 space because of the pace of the space, and then the products are not built so fast as people expect.
Yeah.
So how do you manage to your struggles and the challenges that you feel, like from the personal perspective, like from the mental health maybe?
So I think again, this comes back to having like a good network of people, having close friends, being, locking yourself in your room and not talking to people is not going to help. And then like understanding like who else is out there who's done it before, just chatting to them, explaining. My biggest thing in Web3 at the beginning was, and I went through this, if you're going to be trading NFTs and trading crypto, don't go and like, you can talk to your parents and like your girlfriend and stuff, but don't expect them to understand. You going to your girlfriend and telling them, hey, I just lost $34,000 on this trade of this digital monkey. She's going to look at you and be like, I'm so sorry. But in her head, she's going to be like, what are you doing? Like, you're an idiot. Like, but if you go to your friend who understands crypto as a native and you say, look, I made a bonehead move, I made a terrible trade, I lost all this money, they're going to be like, look, man, been there before. Here's what you do. Just got to breathe. Don't go into the next trade like that. You got to talk to people who understand it and have been there and empathize with you as well. I think this kind of goes into with WAGMI. Like I went and was like talking to some people that are running like tech companies, and they kind of got it, but at the end of the day, they were like, screw the fans, like don't care what they think, like, and I don't think, they're just, because 20 fans hate you doesn't mean anything. It matters to me. And the more I talk to other people in the sports industry, like you do have to like understand that everybody down to the youngest fan who just went to his first game to the oldest fan who's been there 20 years, they all matter. Everybody matters. And you have to go into this understanding that they don't have the information you have. They're down, there's been this history with American owners within the EFL that have a terrible past. You have history of owners coming in and not caring about the club. It's just a toy to them. So you have to have this perspective, and you have to operate with that perspective as well. I think from the mental health side, I've really tried to not let myself get overwhelmed. I've tried to take like a breath every once in a while, but also like just get out of the house. Like this is gonna sound like crazy, but like just getting out of the house and like going and like, whether it's to the beach or like going to play like tennis or something, like just get out and like step away for it for a second has helped. Yeah, it's definitely, mental health is one that like is close to my heart here, for sure.
If there are more sports teams or like sports clubs entering Web3 now, or what would you advise them for their first steps?
Oh, that's a good question. So I think if you're doing it now, if you're entering the space as like a team or organization that's implementing Web3, here's the biggest thing. You have to understand that your core consumer base, your core clients don't know NFTs, they don't know crypto, they don't have a wallet, and they're not native to this new, technology you're trying to implement. And you have to understand that. So you either have to do one of two things. You either come in and you need to be like the best onboarding white glove educational experience possible, or you need to understand that they're just going to be, late to the game, and that you have to direct your Web3 stuff to Web3 natives. I think that's one of the biggest mistakes that we see new entrants into the space make, is that they just assume, hey, this is kind of directed at a launch we saw recently, but hey, I'm this multi-billion-dollar brand. Everybody buys my products, which are worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. I'm going to offer an NFT that gives you access into the brand. And it's, let's say it's $2,000, $3,000, whatever. Everybody's going to buy it because they love our brand and we're so big, and like we're entering Web 2 or Web 3. Your consumer base isn't just gonna be, all right, now I'm a Web3 buyer, I'm gonna go make a MetaMask. And like, just because you have hundreds of thousands of clients across the globe doesn't mean, well, 1% of them have a MetaMask, they'll mint it out. Like, you have to understand, you have to direct your offering to Web3 in a way that speaks to them and makes sense. And you have to also understand that your consumer base probably doesn't understand what's going on yet. And you need to explain that to them and onboard them. And it's gonna be this like weird, I can already hear like the advertising and the marketing departments that like listen to this going like, oh no, like our Web 2 brand and our Web 3 brand are two different things. We don't want to like muddy the waters. And like, if we advertise from like the official, brand account that we're going into Web 3 and doing NFTs, they're gonna like, we're gonna be called scam art. You gotta decide. Like, you just have to you have to lean into it, and you have to understand like, this is where it's going. You can't play like in the gray area. You just got to lean into it.
Yeah, like there is a lot of examples that you can see that they kind of tried, they experimented a little bit, and then they kind of like disappeared from the space for a year, and probably they will be back. But
they'll be back. Yeah. They're very risk adverse, I will say that.
Well, if we talk about from the fund perspective, and you as an investor, like from another side of the game, you as an investor, and I mean like experienced as a founder, like what do you look into when you talk with the founders?
Just like I invest in things I'm passionate about, I want to see a founder who's passionate about what they're building. I want to see what their background is and what they're building. So, have they done this before? Is this within their core skill set? Do they have a proficiency within it? Do they understand how this scales and grows as a business? I mean, there's so many little things, because I had this talk yesterday with somebody who I'm helping pitch their company, and I want to see like that grant, like lay it all out, like show me like the master plan of like, where were you when you got into this industry, where you are today, and how you're going to grow this into this giant thing. For me personally too, I also look at things that are like infrastructure plays that, are going to be used by everybody in the space, where like, we've talked to a recent company that's doing CRM stuff, and like how they can basically go from like servicing 10 clients to servicing the entire industry for communications. Like, that gets me excited. And they have a good vision of like how they get from 1 to 10 to 100, 1,000, 10,000, like that exponential growth. I genuinely also care about founders that are building in this space who are very aware of like the history of the space. I've seen a couple come in recently who are like, yep, like we're building a Web3 product and we're doing this. And I'll bring up like, oh, well, we've seen X, Y, and Z do similar things and fail. How are we going to navigate that? And like, they're new entrants. I think understanding the history of the space is also very important. So when you're a native to the space and you can speak to it and you're trading and you're actively part of it, it definitely is like a checkbox in my side of things. I'm like, okay, they're a degen at heart in some sense. That definitely is a good thing to hear. I mean that in like not like they're doing like dumb trades and stuff, but like, I think there's like a respectful thing of like when you find somebody who's has that same kind of passion for what the technology is, not only in their niche product, but the overarching one. It's definitely a pro to have that.
Really like understanding the culture and how people take, I think is really important. I mean, you can see in different brands coming into the space, if you don't really understand the culture, that's a huge problem.
Yes.
And it won't last very long. I mean, people can be forgiving, but they're also really harsh in the space.
I
So
think it's overly harsh. I think, a lot of people talk about crypto as being like this scam, terrible place. I think it's just because it's so visible, like it exposes it much easier. But one side of things that like has bugged me is that, in Web3, if you're a founder right now and you're building something, I've found that Web3 founders are more scared to fail than Web2 founders. And I think that's because failure in Web3 is like seen as like not an option. And if you do, you're a terrible person and you should have figured it out. And it's like it's this whole like dramatic thing. And we're very harsh to people that do take that risk to build something here. Where in Web 2, it's like, okay, if you launch something and it fails, good try. Like, it's expected, business is hard. I think, bringing that back to the mental health spot, if you are a founder in this space right now, you need to understand that, as long as you're not scamming people or promising things that you can't do, failure is okay. And it's just we're in a very vocal spot of like everything is taking place on social media and in these chat rooms and discords where, people are fine to just share their opinions and be very vocal about it. And you just have to understand that it's part of the game and not let it get to you.
yeah, I wanted to ask you, is there any industry that you haven't invested in that you're passionate about that you want to get into?
Ooh, that's a really good one. So as of like a week ago, it was in the apparel and fashion industry. I grew up doing a lot of stuff within the apparel industry, doing silkscreen printing and some merchandising stuff. That one, I'm about to check off my box in the Web2 world. So that would have been my answer. I think now it's shifted. Oh man, that's a really hard one.
That's interesting though. So you had to do with printing and like
Yeah,
fashion.
so I grew up around one of the largest like t-shirt brands in the world, Big Johnson. So it's kind of like this immature play on the word and like so I grew up around them and like seeing them like launch this brand and like you know all the silk screening and like the production side of things. And then that led me into another kind of area where I was around like the largest tie dyer on the East Coast that provided tie dye garments to everybody. And like I got obsessed with it because I thought it was so cool that you could basically take like this random piece of cloth and put something on it or embroider something on it. And now somebody like identifies with it. So like this one is New York or nowhere. Like it's an amazing brand. They do amazing stuff, but I have an affinity for it because I truly love New York, and it's like one of those places I would love to be or nowhere else. Um, and so that's led me down a path of like launching a few brands and like doing some things, but I never had like a true like massive company that was at scale servicing millions of people a month. With some things that like we've put in motion, especially on the talent agency side, and how we're helping people scale their brands and launch their own businesses, we kind of were like, okay, I think it's time for us to now have skin in the game in a manufacturing play for apparel. So we recently we're about to close and get all that wrapped up. So we'll basically be serving merchandise apparel on 4 different continents going forward. I think in March, everything will launch off. No Web3 play. But I think I do see how probably by Q2 or Q3 of this year, we integrated in a way to like do licensing of Web3 graphics into apparel in a unique way. Obviously, you guys are doing stuff within the fashion space. We have GMI, like there's a ton of stuff happening. And I think we're in a space now where you can be as creative as you want to, because that is like the underlying culture of fashion and of apparel, is to be creative, think outside the box, test it, push the boundaries, and provide things that make people go, oh wow, that evoked motion from me and made me think this way or feel this way. So I'm like super passionate about that, and I'm very excited to see what it becomes.
Now, at first, I'm interested to know, how do you slice your time? Like, how do you separate your time into your different businesses? And maybe what is SD actually doing? And like, How do they work?
Yeah, so I can explain the time thing first. So I have a lot on top of like Futureproof, which is the investments, SDA does talent, and then like there's a music label and division that I run, and then a few other like small bits and ends. So my day and my calendar right now I'm looking at is just it's packed, right? I basically use my time where I can have the most impact. So if there's a meeting or something that's happening, like I know there's one or two today where I will go and I'll have one or two things to say and that's it. I won't go. I'm ultimately right now trying to move as quickly as possible to add infrastructure, scale things, and provide like get them to a flowing business where I can at the end of the day just sit at the top and have the ability to move it in large directions, macro moves instead of micro moves. Um, STA, the music label, the Futureproof, all at the end of the day, I'm pushing to bring into one umbrella, or they all flow together into one larger company. So if you look at like CAA, WME, VaynerX, like these are companies that have all these things that can play together to allow them to basically be like one large business with little business units under it. Um, we're getting there. It's a huge, ambitious, crazy thing for a 28-year-old to be trying to build, but I ultimately think I have the right partners, I have the right people around me, and I think patience. Like I'm not expecting for myself to be making millions of dollars or even hundreds of thousands of dollars this year or next year. I'm on like a 5-year, 10-year timeline where I look back and it's, I've built something, taken the time, made the right choices, delayed my own gratification to build that ultimate business that I see myself wanting to run. STA currently is managing about I don't know how many hundreds of millions of views per week right now. But we do manage like some of the largest names and creators in the world. So Caleb Simpson, who's like a very good friend and somebody that we've spoken to like almost all like the last 10 days straight has just been like I've been at his house, we've been like working on stuff. I don't know if you've seen them. I'm curious if you have you seen the guy who goes like, how much do you pay for rent? And then he goes into their apartments.
Yeah, yeah,
Yes.
I love it.
So like we look at him as this amazing creator and now looking at how do we turn him into, instead of just making this content, into a business, how do we scale his career, how do we bring opportunities and products and everything from like a physical product or merchandise all the way to like a SaaS business. And how does that work with other clients that we're working with and other brands that we're working with. We'll announce our Web3 signings. We'll announce like our whole signing list in like a week of who we're working with, some very big names, very big brands in the Web3 space, and how we're basically going to use Web2 and Web3 to merge them together and not only like onboard more people to the Web3 space, but also like how does that like ebb and flow between the two work, and how do you build a Web3 presence using the Web2 side, and how do you build the Web2 presence using the Web3 side? But we're ultimately focused right now on being a agency that helps build people's brands and careers and turn them into businesses. And the biggest thing I hate is when people are like, oh, he's an influencer. No, that we want to turn you into like a business owner that has multiple verticals, multiple pieces of revenue, doing things that you didn't have the infrastructure for. Now having that infrastructure because of who we have working at the agency and what our technical backgrounds are.
This is such an interesting and such a big chunk of your what you're doing that I think it's going to be another separate podcast just to talk about things, how you kind of run it around and how you turn influencers into businesses and do more than just the content. About the trends that you predict in the next few years, let's say next 3 years, that are kind of related to Web3 and maybe how it's going to influence the world beyond Web3.
So I'll say this, I think everything will integrate Web3 in some sense over the next 10 years. So, all of my answers, even though they might not seem Web3, at some point they will be. I think user generated content's the big one. Like from like a macro business perspective, it's just going to affect every business, every brand, every company is just going to be focused on this over the next couple of years because it's still, I think, underutilized. And there will be somebody who comes to life and says, here's how we're going to bring Web3 into that and allow for creators to truly have skin in the game, get paid, and have security in the content they're making. Whether that's like through advertising or like selling or licensing their content, I don't know, but I do think user generated content's a big one. I think infrastructure then is kind of like that underlying tone of, okay, who's building like the pipes and the sewers that actually let all that happen? And that's like a big investment thesis of mine right now, where it's the very unsexy thing that you have no idea is happening in the background, but lets me use a credit card to get instantaneous payment to that, that business or individual. And there's like a settlement layer, like that gets me excited. But I do think you'll start to also see a lot of these large Web2, corporations start to figure out and get a hold of using Web3 in that sense of, you don't know it's there, it's being utilized, and it provides like a better experience to the customer. They're not just going to do it to do it. They might not be doing it even to make money, but because the experience is better, basically people want to use their company more and they have a market advantage. I think we'll see that. And I think the last one I'll say is, I think what we've seen so far is like PFPs and generative art have played out, and they've been kind of like the pinnacle of the market and where all the attention is. I think gaming is starting to have their moment where, there's been a lot of money sunk into gaming. There are hundreds of millions of dollars. We'll probably see this next huge explosion out of gaming. I think that's where it'll come from. Then looking back to you guys, like, how are you dressing your characters? What assets are there? All the way down to like your character, your account, being able to transfer that. It might not be the metaverse, but the actual implementation at scale across the industry being a standard, I think is what I'm really excited for, just because you're going to start to see people who think crypto's stupid or never touch it without knowing, and be rewarded in a financial way behind that, which will be exciting.
Now, to ask your last question, if you could pick one superpower, which one would it be?
I think it would be mind reading.
Oof, are you sure you want that though? People can be really harsh with their words. Might be harsher with their thoughts.
It's interesting. I think it's like a year by year thing. I used to be like bullied in middle school, and I used to care so much about what people said and thought about me.
Same.
And I think it's one thing that I've started to really grow out of, and I still struggle with this. Like, if I read all of my comments on Twitter, and like by day, I will always get something that's like very negative towards me. I think having that understanding of like, not everybody's gonna like you, not everybody's gonna care what you're doing. I'm starting to really be comfortable with that. The reason I say mind reading though is like, I think it's always interesting just to like know, like, what if you knew what they were thinking, or how are they feeling about a certain situation? It's just very interesting to me. Yeah, I don't know. It's just like I'm always very curious. This also was from dinner last night. We had a whole conversation about knowing what somebody was thinking in a different language. And yeah, I was like, oh yeah, what if you could mind read? So I thought that was super interesting. If you could understand like whatever anybody in the world is thinking, at scale, it's a super, super powerful tool.
Especially on the meetings.
Exactly.
And during podcasts as well. Yeah.
Exactly. There you go.
Digitally, yeah. Yeah, that'd be cool. But I'm so thankful for this conversation. I think we as a founders also could relate to some of the topics that you were kind of discussing, and also could maybe learn some of the things that we will still need to experience. And I really appreciate it.
I So appreciate you guys making the time to talk to me, inviting me on, and so excited to continue the relationship.
I hope you enjoyed the episode. I certainly love recording it because this unique blend of professional insights and personal experiences feels like you get to know the person a bit better. Hunter has really unique insights into all things Web3. You can find Hunter under Hunter Orrell on Twitter and his football club WAGMI United as well. And as you know, we love receiving your feedback, so shoot us a message on Twitter under Unique Labs.